All right. Well, thanks for talking to me, Amardeep.
Absolutely, Alejandro. Thanks for having me on.
So maybe at first, if you can just kind of give us your name and a little bit of background.
Sure. My name is Amardeep from northern India. Moved to Wisconsin at a young age. Started directing at 20 something. Went to get my MFA and continued directing films. My first feature narrative, Baby Blues, was a $1.1 million film that was kind of like The Shining, but instead it followed mom going after her family and in a postpartum psychosis. And then I continued on, and after that one film, I kind of had this like bad feeling about narrative film that if you do something dark and very disjointed, it starts to like fester inside of you. So I started looking at documentaries and working on commercials and all these other different things. So over the last 3 years, I've predominantly been into the doc world, which many people know is kind of a completely different world than narrative.
Yeah, what's great about the documentary field and some of your work, I mean, you're bringing some important issues to light. And what you're doing here, what you've done with Sirius is uh, different than other stuff that you've looked at. How did you get involved with this project?
So essentially, a studio picked us up and wanted us to do a narrative film on the subject of UFOs and ancient aliens and all these things that are in the vogue right now. So once you start cracking that research as a writer, I mean, it takes you down a deep, deep rabbit hole, and you start thinking about what's real, what's not real. Your mind starts, shuttling around. So I called up Steve, Dr. Greer, and just gave him a jingle, and I said on a cold call, hey, we're finished with the script. We'd love for you to consult on it. By consultation, literally, I was asking him at the end of the film, can we just put one line that sends people to the disclosureproject.org? That's all we were asking, and he at the dinner was like, and it was kind of to be honest, like a really, really simple suggestion. We were just like, hey, we could do it with or without your help because we're just promoting your website. But we got to dinner and he started telling me all these fantastical stories and all these different ideas and I was like, man, this guy's really, really interesting. But not interesting like he's telling me the truth, like interesting, like the guy is a lightning rod for a lot of different thoughts and ideas. So I was like, have you ever thought about doing a documentary? And he fired back and looked at me and he goes, yeah, we've been trying to do one. And then I didn't realize, like, you got to understand, I know very little about Dr. Stephen Greer, you know? And so I Google him later that night. Me and him have a discussion about, okay, maybe we can cross synergize and make something happen. I Google him, and of course, there is like completely like 50-50 results on his Google, right? Like you can look at Dr. Stephen Greer as medical doctor, disclosure project doctor, Stephen Greer, or you can start going down some other realms and other loopholes and rabbit holes. And we decided either way, he's a really interesting narrative story. He's an interesting biographical human being. So we pitched it to him as a project. We said, look, we would like to do a documentary. You would be part of the through line of the documentary, following you in search of the truth. You know, he dug it. Little did I know, of course, he's gonna dig it. But he definitely enjoyed the idea, and later we got into discussions about how to make it happen. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's when we started rolling into crowdfunding and all these different elements.
Mm-hmm. Now, you brought up a good point about the two sides of his research. There's like the credible witnesses and medical side, and then there's also kind of the more metaphysical side. And you tackled both sides in the film. How did you feel, and we'll get into your experience, but going out to meditate to actually try to call in extraterrestrials, were you pretty skeptical? What were your views when you did that?
Well, I'm not like I come from a very Vedic culture. Like we meditate all the time, like literally at home. My parents raised me meditating. We would, if you got into a fight, my dad would sit you down, give you a glass of water, and say meditate. He wouldn't like, it really is for us like oxygen. It's like the normal thing to do. So I take it for granted because not thinking that other cultures aren't like that. I didn't realize that it is really hard for people to just close their eyes and focus on a thing. And then, now that I'm kind of researching it, I kind of gather, I understand why there's a lot of thoughts that just keep popping up when you're thinking about things. But I wasn't as skeptical about the metaphysical side. I'm more skeptical in terms of like, the thing is, you got to understand the UFO realm, this weird breed of researchers that has formed and galvanized are usually like people that are shunned by mainstream society, and so they have a lot of psychological disjointed thoughts and processes. And so I was more skeptical about people that are calling themselves researchers when they're technically documentarians who just were told information, in an interview, and then walk out and say, "Okay, look, I'm a researcher now." Well, of course you're a researcher. We all filmmakers are researchers, but that's not what you've been doing for 30 years, and the research isn't all that deep because it's just a new subject. It can't be as deep as like researching, let's say, astrophysics. Right now we have a deeper understanding of that stuff. So I was more skeptical about people who say they know than the people who say they don't know. So I'm always worried, how can you say you know these things? So that's what I wanted to get into. It's like, how do people really say they know? And then I started to realize, well, it's more of a passion thing. It's more about, if, like, for example, for Steve, it holds his identity together. It holds him and binds him to this research and this topic and the people that he communicates with. So for me, it became, okay, it's a community. It's almost like a religious community. Not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying that when you find some truth, whether it's, oh, okay, there's a universal God and God is one, you find this truth, some people put it in a lightning bottle and try to sell it to you and try to make you go do it or try to like push their agenda on you. So I will say I was more skeptical in that arena, especially because after picking up the phone and calling so many UFO researchers, after picking up the phone and calling so many technologists who I would believe would want to be a part of a documentary like this, instead it was almost constantly, well, how much are you paying me? Or what's going to happen with this? Well, there was like 75 conflicting agendas. I don't like Steve, or I don't do this, or this guy over here shunned me last time and wrote a bad article. And I was like, dude, no wonder you guys aren't getting anywhere with your agenda. Even if you have the truth, you're fighting each other all the time.
Yeah. So I guess one of the areas I was getting into, and it's kind of because I hear what you're saying. I mean, I've learned to meditate. I meditate a lot. But going out into the field, it seems like, you had a unique experience out there. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Absolutely. It was a crazy experience because at that point, I just read Steve's book. I've read multiple of his books now because I have to, but I also thought about it as just like conceptually, there is a mind over matter principle that is happening at some point. And maybe right now, if we taught our children to meditate for the next 7,000 generations and we completely engross them in this understanding, they would get to the point, I think, that they would be able to do ESP and read minds and be able to like connect onto channel one and bring down, different beings or at least connect to them. So I was open to the idea, and so we went out into the field in Crestone, Colorado. My first time at a CSETI event or a CE5 type situation, we gathered around. I think there's about 14 or 15 of us gathered around a circle in the middle of the night, and we started meditating. And in my first meditation, the first time I go out there, I told Steve, I was like, I don't want to bring a camera because A, I don't want to bother the situation. B, as a documentarian, I really want to gather personally what's going on before I bring out cameras. I don't know which lenses to use. I don't know if I should be in night vision mode. I don't know any of this stuff. And of course now, knowing the research, there's a whole bunch of people who will show you on YouTube how to do it or what to go catch. But at that point, you got to think of me as like just a new person coming in. So the first night we go out there, we're in meditation, and all of a sudden, I start seeing faces in front of me. And it's not hard for me to go into deep void, or like for us in Hinduism, and I'm not Hindu, I'm Sikh, but we come from Hinduism. The idea of God is when you ask somebody, hey, if God is the first thing, if I take away all material things, if I take away heat, if I take away all the things that are actual, we're able to label as a human, how would you see God? And so their answer would be you'd see God in your human mind as black, complete blackness, because it's the thing that sits behind everything that exists. You know, it's the thing that stuff arises from. So in my meditation, I was there, like I'd go to black right away, and all of a sudden these faces start coming out of the blackness, like, you know, black and white, like morphing faces, but they were all different. They weren't human. They were completely like different types of faces. And I kept being asked the same question. Are you scared? Are you scared? And I thought of it as like, oh, maybe whatever's asking me the question is asking me, are you really willing to let go, or are you scared to let go and actually see these faces, these different types of faces? And as soon as I said yes, I heard, look up. And like it was like right behind my right ear. It was like, look up. And so because it was behind my right ear, I opened my eyes in the meditation and I looked up like this. And there was this little light just traveling through the sky, and it wasn't like shooting like a shooting star. It wasn't like a satellite traveling like super fast. It wasn't like an airplane that had these blinking lights that you could kind of tell was like kind of moving through the sky. It literally was floating at a distance that did not seem like it was in the stars, or did not seem like it was like super high altitude. And it was floating, and it was doing this like a fish, like moving through the sky, right? And I was just like, so the first thing that we're taught with the CE5 community was, okay, then as soon as you see it, say, hey, does anybody else see something in the south sky 20 degrees up? Or that's the proper protocol. I don't know. A lot of people aren't following proper protocol lately. The reason you're doing proper protocol is simply because you don't want to shock people. As soon as you shock them, you're taking their meditation completely away. So when somebody says something, you want to know that a question is going to be posed, and you know what that person is going to say. So you're in meditation, I say, hey, does anybody else see something in the south sky 25 degrees up? And everybody looks up, and you just hear the, of like human breath. And just everybody just watching. Now, as this thing is floating through the sky, like we're intensively getting warmer on the ground, right? And it feels like this thing is just showering warm rain on us. And not physically warm rain, like just warm, humid, like lift. And then it goes about halfway through the sky and gone, right? And so we watched it for a good, probably I would say 5 minutes. That's how slow it was traveling across the sky. And I walked over to my other camera person at the break. And I was like, how are you doing in the meditation? Like, what was going on? And she looked back at me and she goes, I don't know. It was really, really intense. Like, I was in this, like, blackness, and all of a sudden these, like, faces kept popping up. Wow. And I was like, what did they ask you? And she said, are you scared? And I said, what did you answer? And she goes, I said, no, I'm not scared. And it was just this weird, like, and that's you can ask her the same story without me, like, embellishing any stories. I tried as a documentarian just to give you the facts, but she said that. So from that one viewing, I decided on my camera work. I decided on what we needed to do and how we were going to capture these things, these, I'll call them anomalous things up in the sky.
So that sounds like a pretty profound experience. I mean, do you feel it changed you?
I think that it did give me an understanding, which maybe it's just a humbling understanding, and this is what I mean by it. I'm kind of annoyed with the way UFO researchers have been over the past, like, 2 decades or 3 decades. It gave me a humbling experience thinking to myself, I don't know everything. I want to go know more. And I think that UFO researchers, maybe this is not just about UFO researchers, maybe this is about all scientists. Maybe this is about all theologians. Maybe this is about all politicians. They're young, they get to a point where they are curious like human beings should be, and they're humbled by something that is so beautiful, and they go, I want to know more. But then as they collect the information and knowledge and get some sort of like power, instead of continuing to want to know more, they start professing. They start telling you what they know. And some of it is like obviously them filling in the gaps of their memory, or them going through and trying to convince you of their theory so that you can give to them some way or form. So for me, I'll say it was a humbling experience, and I was shocked, and it was life-changing, and I thought to myself, I need to know more.
Mm-hmm. To put in perspective, because we've talked to Dr. Greer, we've talked to JD, the producer, the director, what is your role when it comes to producing the movie? Like your responsibilities?
It's kind of a weird role in this situation because literally our production company is only really a 5-person production company. So I also had to produce, I wrote, I conceptualized with other teammates at NEL. Like we sat down and we did the research together because it was too much research for one person to do. So Lori Knapp, JD, and I wrote the concept out. We bounced it over to Steve and his team to see, he had some very crucial teammates at one point. Emery Smith, Jan Bravo, Steve. We bounced it to them to see where their ideas were at. They came back and said, okay, we love it. Here's some changes, or here's some people we want to take out because we just don't support their work. And I tried to do my best to maintain good control of narrative and concept. And in this specific case, because we just had such a low budget, I had to edit, I had to shoot, I had to pretty much do everything and anything, whether it's catering or whatever I needed to do to continue the production going, along with the other teammates at NEL, the 5 of us. So my goal as a director is simply to make a film that, I won't say normal people, because anybody that's a fan of the subject or knows about the community, you're not abnormal about knowing, but you got to understand that the mainstream people that are dealing with very, very, very like concrete issues of poverty, of worklessness, of crime, of vicious human behavior, cannot just all of a sudden shift into this thought process. So I wanted to make a film that wasn't taking people from 0 to 1,000. I was trying to make a film that completed a narrative for you to comprehend that there's this bigger vision or this thing going on, and at the end of it, you would be teased and excited about searching for more stuff. You'd go straight to Google, or you'd go straight outside and try a CE5, or you would look at new technology. You would at least, like as a young engineer, look and think about it, and so that was the idea as a director, is to hold that vision. Now that's a hard thing to hold and keep concrete with all of the different dynamics of the theory, because whether it's, can you make contact, or whether there's abductions, whether crop circles exist. I mean, you can go down 96,000 rabbit holes, and so to try to complete a simple narrative, I mean, it's very difficult. Even though the film, when people watch it, might say something like, oh, it was really beautiful and very basic. I mean, to get there is actually quite difficult. It's almost the same as I tell people, the reason some UFO researchers can't wrap up their big diatribe in 2 minutes is because they don't know. But if you know something, you can say it succinctly in a concise way, and you get it, and you can communicate it to other people. That's a difficult task.
Yeah. My last question is kind of twofold. How do you feel about this final project? Are you satisfied that it came out well? And then what do you walk away? What did you get from this experience?
So, I mean, at the time, after the Crestone shoot, we went into other shoots, and that was about June. And then August 5th, 2012, my father was killed at the Sikh temple shooting. Now, this is me going through a conspiracy-like world, right? Like Sirius and all these people have conspiracies, and they conspire because they don't know how to fill in the gaps. They don't, they're looking for a reason why stuff is happening. They just don't know how to fill in the gaps. So I obviously was shaken to the core because I'm thinking to myself, does my dad's death have anything to do with this film? You know, whether, let's say that's option A in my mind. Option B is, you know, my dad just died. I need to stop this project and go take care of my family and the people that I love, you know. But at the same time, I'm connected to all these crowdfunders who came on and wanted to see a film done at the end of this. And the crowdfunders are amazingly good people because they literally are trying to give you the opportunity to make that film, you know? To make it within a year, I mean, most people should know that that's exceptionally unbelievable. To make any film, whether you have $20 million, $10 million, $1 million, to make a film within a year of this scope, of this magnitude, is a miracle. It's no short of a miracle. You can go interview 30,000 documentarians and ask them, you know, how long did their first film take? Or how long did this big epic documentary take? Now, not, I would say less than 0.1% will say less than a year. You know? So for me, at that time on August 5th, I had to decide whether or not to continue with this project and whether or not I was going to go into this conspiracy world or go find out the truth about what happened with my dad. And amazingly enough, in a very short amount of time, with the proper connections at the FBI, with the proper connections at the White House, with the proper connections in media. And I don't mean like small connections. Like, it's amazing to me that some UFO people are like, and I don't want to say this trite, but like they'll say, I briefed somebody, when all they did was ride the bus with them. You know, they briefed somebody, yet all they were was they paid tickets, they paid money to take a ticket at a dinner with that person, and then they'll say, I briefed that person. And it's really of an unbelievable bend on the truth. Now here's me, my dad was just murdered alongside 6 other beautiful people in the temple he started, and I am adequately equipped as a documentarian or as an investigator to find the truth. You know, I'm not like a mental, like, crazy bag. I'm actually, like, pretty firm, calling up everybody I know in any position of power to get people on the ground to figure out whether or not this is a conspiracy. And over, above, and beyond, we come to find out so much about the person that committed the crime. We come to find out so much about this type of stuff in terms of racism, extremism, becoming a complete problem in America just after Barack Obama is elected, or after Mexican immigration is becoming the hotbed topic. You know, like, the thing is, people got to comprehend those are real problems on the ground right now. People don't even want to see brown people around. This guy walked into a temple and shot my dad because he wore a turban and a beard. I mean, the conspiracy on that is pretty hard to prove since the guy had been doing it for 12 years beforehand, you know, and been arrested multiple times. Long story short, what I take from this project is the idea that truth is, you're going to keep continuing to search for truth no matter what. Even after you watch this film, you're going to continue. Even after you read the Bible, you're going to continue. If you ever feel like you're getting to a point where you know it all, you've shut down, you've stopped. You're not a scientist anymore. You're not an analyst. You're not a researcher. You are a professor, you know, and you have to be really, really careful because that what you're professing might honestly become your life, and you might end up walking those same footsteps that you asked to walk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does, and you know, it makes me think of just like in this field with Boston and all of these other things. I mean, I want to say first, really sorry about what happened for your father, and it was an example where the country can come together and the dangers of extremism in all of these different areas, including, like you mentioned, the areas that you touched on in the film. So
they're dangerous. They're dangerous. Fundamentalism, at the end of the day, just believing to believe, without having reason or rationality. I mean, every major philosopher in history of time will talk about the danger of that. And some of them have gone to their grave, like scientists like Galileo, all these different people being persecuted, and even proving, in matter of fact, like this is true.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing I'll take away from this film. Do I think that, I think you asked me, do I like the outcome? Do I believe in it? I really wholeheartedly believe that Sirius is one of the best films on the subject. I don't mean it as like it's going to be a glossary of information for you to gather, but when a mainstream normal person watches this film and it's a 2 hour long film and it doesn't like completely bore you to death, with like just people like propagandizing their thoughts. Instead, you follow real humans on a search. You follow real people doing inventions with real machines from the Department of Defense. You're following very real things, including the Atacama humanoid, which you're being able to literally, for the first time in the history of the planet, analyze at the DNA and genetics level from one of the highest universities in the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a conundrum because I read some reviews. I try not to read too many reviews, but people, the really hardened people who think that they know everything will continue to say, "Oh, Sirius didn't go far enough." But you gotta understand, we weren't making the film for those people. We were making the film for the 15-year-old kid in Belgium who has an idea about new technology and never realized, oh, there was this connection of all these things. Maybe I should go search that. We didn't want to just make him into a fundamentalist, which that is the conundrum with media. You can make anybody into a fundamentalist. Hitler did it with a whole nation, and he used film as his weapon. So as documentarians, we have to like stop and put a pause on that and say, look, we can propagandize or we can actually just document.
Right.
Let's just try to document.
Your film is going to be shown at the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure this week. Do you feel the citizen, as an outsider looking in at the UFO community, is this hearing, you think, going to make some big steps in the mainstream, or do you think it's more for ufologists, kind of more of talking amongst themselves type of thing?
I think that the question was excellent, and, it's an excellent problem and a predicament that I'm seeing. This is not the first time a citizens hearing really has been held. It's almost always a citizens hearing because, to be honest, those press conference things, even Disclosure Project, literally are a bunch of citizens gathering together and going on the mic and doing a press conference and opening the floor to all other citizens to come and inviting people to come. So it's not the first time that the idea of council people, former senators, former councilmen, actually talking and having a discussion, that is vital. That is an interesting thing because it allows us to understand that we have to engage our government. Do I think that it's a bunch of ufologists kind of stroking their egos? I think that there's a couple conundrums. Like, for example, we make a film called Sirius at a budget of $250. The rest of the $250 is supposed to be used for distribution and marketing, and getting the film out. That's like a bare bone minimum budget for something of this like magnitude, or for somebody to work on for 11 months, with 5 people and just a ton of normal film production problems, right? And then you got the citizens hearing spending about $1 million to do that. I venture to think our film, which has already been seen by something like 100,000 people, or like 40 to 100,000 people, let's say. We don't know how many people pirated it, but I think that the film will have an impact on the zeitgeist in one direction. It will actually show people that are media savvy, entertainment savvy, that there's this thing happening. You could be a part of it. If this is interesting to you, you could be a part of it. And then what they did with their time and resources is the citizens hearing, and they brought up a lot of the people that we've obviously like all kind of been hearing about for 20-some years. I don't know. I mean, it's probably going to provoke. It's more of an internal UFO community forum. So for us, it's external. We're trying to tell the project or tell people about this theory or information to outside people that don't know anything. And do it in a way that they can eat it, because it's a big meal. Now, for them, they're probably going through the nooks and crannies and having discussions about certain things that A, have been debunked, or B, haven't, and they're going through it. And I just, to show you, like, I mean, we at our production company, our 5 people, never got invited to this citizens hearing. Our film got invited, but we're more than happy to be, like, on the outside of the situation, because we're not researchers. Though I've watched 500 hours of footage, though I've watched every Disclosure Project tape you can think of, though I've sat down with a ton of people and kind of been able to quiz them and ask them, I could never call myself a UFO researcher. Partly because I think it's horrible when people do that, when they make a documentary or step in front of a mic in front of somebody that really does know the situation. They like literally they steal the mic. So I'm open and happy to talk about the film and what I think about the situation, but I definitely think the citizens hearing is a good thing. It's going to provoke some stuff towards government. It's going to force people to deal with the government problem. 2, it's going to get the internal part of the UFO community churning and talking about stuff. And I mean, I think it's going to be a big success in those directions.
Mm-hmm.
Can I say one thing that's random?
Definitely.
So, I came to this whole situation very objective, and everybody keeps asking me, do you believe, do you believe? And I ask people, I think this is what our answer should always be to the people that do think there's something anomalous in the skies. They do believe new energy exists. They do believe that different civilizations across the universe have gotten there or been able to do different things. If you're one of those people and somebody asks you, do you believe? Ask them, does it really matter? Because at the end of the day, I mean, it matters in the fact that you're trying to influence somebody else to believe, but just look at the cost-benefit analysis. Whether or not extraterrestrials exist or UFOs are in the sky, it makes you go out and actually look up at the sky and take in all of this new information, right? So, or whether or not you're told that governments might be hiding secrets. We obviously know that it's probably true, but the cost-benefit analysis on that is, if you do believe, you're going to actually quiz your government. You're going to force them to do stuff. Whether or not you believe a new energy exists, it doesn't matter, as long as, is it really bad to go look for new technology or new energy? Because the cost-benefit on that is completely, like, the benefits are this high, the costs are like dropping off the floor. The cost is ridicule, which is associated with ego. And if at one point you just throw away ego and say, look, I don't really care what you think. I'm cool with it. I'm cool with myself. I can be wherever I want to be. That just goes off the table. And now all you have is benefits.
Yeah, it's always great to get a fresh look, and you definitely have been sharing a lot of wisdom, so it's been a great conversation.
Alejandro, thank you guys at
Thank
Open
you.
Minds, and you let us know if you need anything. We'll be there for you.
For sure. And now that we're done, I mean, I appreciate too, that's one of the scary things in this field is when people demonize law enforcement. I mean, when we see these situations, Boston or whatever, or the situation with your father, these people are putting in so many hours. They're literally putting their bodies in front of bullets. I mean, and to just say they're all corrupt and evil, that's one of the things that hurts me a lot when I hear people talk about that sort of thing, because these people work so hard to keep people safe.
Yeah, it's scary because you can't be a fundamentalist on this side if you're supposed to be enlightened and kind of thinking about enlightenment or trying to figure out new ways of thinking. How can you be a fundamentalist? It's the worst part of it. So you can't throw the CIA out with the bathwater. You can't throw the FBI out. You can't throw politicians out, because probably a lot of them do have some really good thoughts and ideas, and they want to do good things, and they're sacrificing so much time and energy. Mm-hmm. They just live in a system that might be flawed.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. All right, thanks, man. We better get going. But thanks a lot.
Awesome, guys. See you.
Bye-bye.